first breeze of the day that found me before I moved, slipped through the half-open window like a quiet hand, touching my shoulder, not to wake me, but to remind me that morning had come, whether or not I was ready. I lay there, eyes half open, watching pale gold light stretch slowly across the far wall, thin at first, then widening until the room glowed with a calm too gentle to fear. The breeze carried the scent of damp earth and the faint echo of distant branches, shifting in their early dance, a soft, careful rhythm that loosened the night, still clinging to my bones. I sat up slowly, feeling the sheets fall in quiet waves around my waist, my breath steady, my heart softer than the day before. The breeze moved again, a slow drift, a whisper of morning brushing past my cheek, and I felt for the first time in longer than memory could tell that the world wasn't waiting for me to prove anything. It just wanted me present, alive, breathing, barefoot in the mild glow of something beginning. I placed my feet on the wooden floor, letting the cool grain greet my skin, and the breeze met me there as if guiding me toward the day I hadn't yet shaped. The first breeze of the day that found me before I moved carried a mercy soft and true. It slid beneath the weight I carried, like morning learning who I grew. And though the past still lingered gently in the quiet rooms I'd been through, I felt ready for the sunrise when the breeze found me before I moved. I stood slow, still waking, still believing that healing comes in small invitations, in tender reminders, in breath-length moments where the world feels close enough to touch. The breeze circled me, filling the space between my ribs with something clean, something patient, something warm enough to trust. I closed my eyes, tilted my head, and let the wind brush across my face until I felt a soft rising inside my chest, a stir, a spark, a beginning. Some mornings don't ask you to rise, they rise for you, carrying the first breath, the first warmth, the first breeze toward the soul that's finally ready to receive it. The first breeze of the day that found me before I moved carried a mercy soft and true. It slid beneath the weight I carried, like morning learning who I grew. And though the past still lingered gently in the quiet rooms I'd been through, I felt ready wait for the sunrise, when the breeze found me before I moved. I whispered into the drifting air, lead me slowly, I'll follow. The way the light sat patiently on the door until I touched it, felt almost human, a small golden square, resting quietly near the handle, as if the morning itself had been waiting for my hand. I approached slowly, still half inside my thoughts, still barefoot, still wrapped in the softness of waking. And the light glowed without flicker, without urgency, calm, steady pulse against the wood. I raised my hand, hesitant, not out of fear, but out of reverence for something so still and so gentle that I didn't want to disturb it. My fingers hovered just above the warm glow, feeling heat rise from a sun still stretching itself awake. When I finally touched it, the warmth climbed across my palm, up the length of my arm, into the quiet center of my chest, where the last remnants of yesterday still linger. The light didn't break, didn't dim, didn't shatter, it deepened, softened as if welcoming my uncertain touch. And for a moment I realized this door, this light, this morning had no expectations. They simply existed beside me, ready when I was. The way the light sat patiently on the door until I touched it, told me change can wait and stay. It warmed the spaces in my heartbeat that had cooled from yesterday. And though the past still pressed its shadows in the corners of the hallway, the morning held its promise when the light waited on my way. I pushed the door gently, letting it open into a room filled with a hush so soft it felt like a cradle of something new. The air inside was cool, but not distant, like a welcome saved just for me, a quiet place for my breath to settle. I stepped across the threshold, watching the light stretch forward onto the floor, as if guiding me into the next small moment of becoming. Some warmth doesn't chase us, it waits on doors, on floors, on mornings, holding still until the soul reaches out to touch it. The way the light sat patiently on the door until I touched it, told me change can wait and stay. It warmed the spaces in my heartbeat that had cooled from yesterday. And though the past still pressed its shadows in the corners of the hallway, the morning held its promise when the light let my hand rest on the fading warm glow, and whispered softly, I'm ready. Open gently. The gentle shift in the curtains that told me I wasn't alone moved like a soft sigh across the morning window, a small trembling wave of pale fabric swaying slowly as if breathing me. I stood near the frame, bare feet on cool floor, hands still quiet from the hush of waking thoughts, and watched the curtain lift, fall, lift again, in a rhythm too tender to ignore. It wasn't the wind, not fully, it was something softer, something that knew my chest had carried far more nights than it ever shared aloud. A step closer, feeling the air shift against my cheek, a warm drift, a cool return, a pulse like the heartbeat of a room that had finally opened itself to me. The curtain brushed my fingers just barely, a passing touch so light, so human. It startled me into stillness, and in that stillness I realized this quiet space, this early hour, this trembling fabric existed with me. Not beside me, not around me, but with me. As if the whole morning had been watching, waiting, ready to remind me that presence doesn't always require a voice. The gentle shift in the curtains that told me I wasn't alone carried comfort soft and true. It drifted through the silent room like the world reaching toward you. And though the past still held its shadows in corners I once called my own, I felt held by moving fabric that told me I'm not alone. Let my fingertips rest on the edge of the curtain, feeling its slight tremble against the small breeze, and it felt like touching calm itself, warm, living, patient. I closed my eyes, letting the hush settle deeper toward the bottom of my breath, and for a moment I felt accompanied by something I couldn't name but deeply recognize. Not a person, not a memory, but a presence, the kind that arrives when the soul stops bracing for the next hurt. Some company arrives in fabric shifting, in air that moves softly, in curtains breathing, where the heart learns to listen again. The gentle shift in the curtains that told me I wasn't alone, carried comfort soft and true. It drifted through the silent room like the world reaching toward you. And though the past still held its shadows in corners I once called my own, I felt held by moving fabric that told me I'm not alone. I whispered into the soft moving air, stay with me just like this. The small circle of warmth on the floor that waited for my bare feet glowed like a quiet promise right in front of the bed, a round patch of pale gold held in place by the steady hand of morning light. I sat up slowly, letting my legs fall over the edge, feeling the cool air wrap around my ankles before the day fully found me. The room was silent but not empty. A hush filled the space like a soft anticipation, as if something in it knew I needed a gentler start. I lowered my feet toward the warmth, watching light shimmer across the wooden grain, in tiny waves like sunlight dancing on the surface of a lake. And when my toes finally touched the glow, heat rose soft, forgiving, a quiet reminder that the world could still feel kind. My breath deepened without effort, my shoulders dropped without intention. And for a long moment I simply stood there, letting the warmth find its way into the places inside me that still braced for old storms. The small circle of warmth on the floor that waited for my bare feet held my trembling with care. It melted the weight of 1,000 nights into calm within the air. And though my past lay folded softly in memories bittersweet, I found morning in the sunlight, waiting for my feet. I stepped fully into the glow, feeling it spread beneath the arches of my feet. Up my calves toward the quiet center of my heartbeat. It was such a small thing, a patch of warm light in a quiet room, but it felt like the beginning of a softer life. A life where I could wake without dread, where my body could greet the day without apology, where warmth could be accepted without question. I looked down at my feet bathed in gold and felt something settle inside me. A certainty, a calm, a gentle yes. Some mornings don't arrive with revelation, they arrive with a single spot of warmth, waiting patiently for the soul to stand upon it. The small circle of warmth on the floor that waited for my bare feet, held my trembling with care, and melted the weight of 1,000 nights into calm within the air. And though my past lay folded softly in memories bittersweet, I found morning in the sunlight, waiting for my feet. I whispered toward the glowing floor, I'm here, take me gently into the day. Quiet stretch of morning air that waited beneath my breathing rose gently with each inhale, like a low tide lifting the worn stones of a shoreline, one soft wave at a time. I sat at the edge of the bed, hands resting loosely on my thighs, feeling the calm gather under my ribs, a cushion of warmth, a slow patient rise. It steadied me without asking for anything in return. The air smelled faintly of wood and cool dust, and a trace of sun trying to sneak its way into the room before I fully woke. I let my inhale deepen, watched my chest widen, felt the air move underneath like someone unseen adjusting a blanket around my breathing. For the first time in longer than I could name my breath, didn't feel like labor, didn't feel like survival. It felt like belonging to a body, learning how to live with gentleness again. The quiet morning held me in a way I didn't know where I could, softly, completely, like a promise, not spoken, but understood. Dust drifted in slow walks through the pale gold light, as if the entire room had decided to float with me for a moment of shared calm. The quiet stretch of morning air that waited beneath my breathing carried every ache with care. It held the weight I kept inside, like hands beneath a prayer. And though the past still whispered softly of nights I failed believing, I found peace in gentle air that waited beneath my breathing. I leaned forward, elbows on my knees, letting my head hang for a single long breath before lifting again into the soft drift of morning. And the air met me there, warmer now, as if responding to my slow awakening, sending calm across the hollow corners of my chest, where old fears still live quietly. I placed a hand over my heart, felt the rhythm move in steady pulses, supported by something larger than myself, a rhythm no longer fighting its own beat. Some healing begins, not in words, but in breath held gently by a morning soft enough to carry you. The quiet stretch of morning air that waited beneath my breathing carried every ache with care. It held the weight I kept inside, like hands beneath a prayer. And though the past still whispered softly of nights I failed believing, I found peace in gentle air that waited beneath my breathing. I let out one long exhale, filling the room with something warm, and whispered to the air itself, stay with me for a while longer. The light that gathers softly on the table before I sat down glowed like a memory that had been waiting for years for me to finally arrive. It shimmered in a small circle across the worn wood, a quiet halo of morning calm, as if the sun had chosen this one place, this one surface, this one moment, to pour its gentleness into my day. I walked toward it slowly, barefoot, bare-hearted, still breathing through the last traces of sleep. The closer I came, the warmer the light felt, spreading across the table in soft waves, like someone smoothing a blanket before I sat. I rested my hand on the edge of the wooden surface, fingers brushing against the warmth rising from it, and realized this light, this table, this quiet morning were offering me a place to simply be. No demands, no questions, no expectation, just presence and warmth, and a soft welcome that my chest had long forgotten how to receive. I sat down slowly, letting the chair creak gently beneath me, and watched the light gather toward my hands as if reaching to greet me. The light that gathered softly on the table before I sat down held a kindness bright and true. It warmed the hollow parts inside that darkness once withdrew. And though my past still echoed gently with shadows deep and brown, I found morning in the sunlight waiting on the table before I sat down. I placed both palms into the soft glow, feeling heat seep upward into the lines, etched by years of trying too hard for things that never learned how to stay. And in that warmth I felt something open quietly, a door inside me that hadn't moved in years. My breath deepened, my shoulders eased, and the air around the table began to shimmer with a peace so simple, so pure, it felt like a new beginning, forming in the space between my hands. Some welcomes arrive without words, a soft circle of light, a table, a chair in the morning that knows your name, the light that gathers softly on the table before I sat down held a kindness bright and true. It warmed the hollow parts inside that darkness once withdrew. And though my past still echoed gently with shadows deep and brown, I found morning in the sunlight waiting on the table before I sat down. I ran my fingertips through the fading glow and whispered into the warmth, thank you for saving this place for me. slow drift of light across the wall that reached me first moved like a whisper coming from a place both distant and familiar. It stretched quietly across the faded pane, a thin, patient band of gold, sliding an inch at a time toward the space where I sat, half awake, half held by the stillness of the room. I hadn't risen yet, hadn't found my breath, hadn't decided whether the day would be heavy or kind. But the light made the first move, crossing the wall like a soft hand reaching out to a weary shoulder. I watched it slowly, barely shifting, barely shimmering, dust floating through it like tiny glittering worlds suspended in morning air. It felt like the world was trying to touch me before I touched it, offering warmth before I asked for it, arriving before I even stood. The light slid another inch across the wall, finally reaching the far corner where shadows used to pool like unspoken thoughts too heavy to name. But this morning even the shadows looked softened, as if washed by a quiet grace I hadn't noticed in years. The slow drift of light across the wall that reached me first held a gentleness deep and true. It traveled softly through the silence like the dawn reaching toward you. And though the past still cast its shadows in corners I once feared to touch, I felt warmed by drifting sunlight that reached me before too much. I leaned back slowly, letting my shoulders rest against the chair, and the light finally met my forehead, then my cheek, then my chest, in a slow fall of gold warmth that felt like forgiveness pouring itself 1 inch at a time. My breath deepened, my ribs softened, and I felt the small tension behind my sternum loosen like I'm not giving up his fight. It was such a small thing, light moving across a wall toward a tired man, but it felt like a quiet rescue, a soft reminder that healing doesn't always come from grand moments. Sometimes it arrives in inches. Some kindness travels slow as sunlight until it finds you exactly where you sit, unready but in need. The slow drift of light across the wall that reached me first held a gentleness deep and true. It traveled softly through the silence like the dawn reaching toward you. And though the past still cast its shadows in corners I once feared to touch, I felt warmed by drifting sunlight then reach me before too much. I whisper into the soft golden air, thank you for finding me early. The faint crease in the blanket that told me I had rested well lay quietly beside me like a silent witness to a night where my breath finally settled into something peaceful. Morning light spilled softly across the fabric, highlighting the shallow dip where my weight had pressed gently for hours. I stared at it longer than I expected, tracing the shape with my eyes, feeling something warm bloom in my chest that didn't feel like fear. I reached out, letting my fingers brush the crease, feeling the memory of sleep still held in the cotton folds, a small indentation, proof that I had finally let go for a full night without waking to thoughts too heavy to cradle. The blanket felt warm, still carrying the heat of my body, an echo of rest. I had long forgotten how to trust. The room was quiet but not empty. Sunlight hovered near the foot of the bed, and the faint breeze through the window lifted the curtain in a slow, gentle sway. The faint crease in the blanket that told me I had rested well held a truth I couldn't hide. It whispered of a softer night where calm and I aligned. And though my past still stirred in shadows, in echoes it once compelled, I found proof within the fabric that I had rested well. I let my hand settle fully on the blanket, feeling its gentle warmth rise into my palm, and for a moment it felt like holding the quiet version of myself, the one that slept without defense, without trembling, without carrying the weight of every yesterday. I sat up slowly, sheets falling in soft waves across my lap, and I looked again at the crease, still there, still gentle, still proving that my body had finally been allowed to rest. I closed my eyes and let gratitude move through my ribs, a soft slow warm current that made my throat tighten, but not with sorrow, with relief. Some healing begins not in waking, but in sleep, where the body finally learns it is safe to let go. The faint crease in the blanket that told me I had rested well held a truth I couldn't hide. It whispered of a softer night where calm and I aligned. And though my past still stirred in shadows and echoes that once compelled, I found proof within the fabric that I had rested well. Had rested well. for holding me through the dark. Where the quiet reached my hand before I even opened my eyes, surprised me more than the morning light, more than the air drifting through the half-open window, more than the soft shifting of sheets against my legs. It was a hush, a warm stillness, a gentle weight resting across my palms, as if the room itself had placed something tender into my hands while I slept. I lay there, not moving, listening to the slow rise of my own breath, feeling peace settle over my skin like a soft blanket folded with intention. My fingers uncurled one by one, moving through the warm air with a softness I hadn't felt in so long. I'd forgotten my body was capable of waking without defense. The quiet deepened around me, not empty, not hollow, but full of a presence I couldn't name, yet recognized somewhere deep in the oldest part of my chest. I didn't rush, didn't reach, didn't open my eyes. I just breathed, hands resting in the gentle calm that found them first. The way the quiet reached my hands before I even opened my eyes. Told me mornings still remember how to meet me with surprise. And though my past still whispers softly in the shadows it divides, I felt calm within the stillness that touched me before my eyes. I finally opened them slowly, letting the world come in. Bit by bit, the ceiling, the glimmer of soft dust, suspended in golden light, the edges of the window glowing faintly with a warmth too kind to fear. My hands still warm, still calm, still held whatever the quiet had placed there. And I realized it wasn't a thing, it was permission, permission to wait without urgency, permission to hold nothing but breath, permission to begin gently. Some mornings lift your hands before they lift your eyes, so your heart can rise at the same pace as your breath. The way the quiet reached my hands before I even opened my eyes, told me mornings still remember how to meet me with surprise. And though my past still whispered softly in the shadows it divides, I felt calm within the stillness that touched me before my eyes. I lifted my hands into the warm light and whispered, thank you for choosing me first.
A small glow beneath a window that waited for my first step, shine with a tenderness I wasn't expecting. A quiet circle of soft gold gathered on the floor as if the sun had placed a welcoming hand there. Just for me, I stood at the edge of the bed, bare feet hovering above cool wood, breath still slow, heart still wrapped in the thin silk of a fading dream. And that glow gleamed upward as if whispering, come here and let the day begin gently. I took one breath and another, feeling warmth reach across the room before I even moved. The glow remained still patient, unhurried like a friend, leaning against a doorway, smiling softly. Without a word, I stepped forward, and when my foot entered the light heat rose through my skin, into my ankle, up my leg, and finally into the quiet center of my chest. It felt like the softest version of belonging. The small glow beneath the window that waited for my first step carried comfort, warm and slow. It wrapped the hollow morning air in a steady golden flow. And though my past still lingered softly in corners I'd come to know, I felt safe within the sunlight, waiting in its glow. I placed both feet in the circle, letting the warmth spread upward and slow. Radiant waves loosening the last remnants of sleep. Still clinging to my ribs, the glow brightened just slightly, not enough to blind, only enough to let me know I had arrived fully in the moment that wanted me most. It was small, just a patch of sun on an old wooden floor, but inside that glow I felt grounded, held, invited. I looked toward the window where morning was rising slowly, painting the sky in soft watercolor blue. And I whispered into the warmth at my feet. Some mornings don't call your name, they simply wait with light, placed gently where you'll find it when you're ready to begin. The small glow beneath the window that waited for my first step carried comfort, warm and slow. It wrapped the hollow morning air in a steady golden flow. And though my past still lingered softly in corners I'd condo, I felt safe within the sunlight, waiting in its glow. I lowered my head, let the warmth settle deeper, and whispered, guide me where the day stays gentle. There's still a patch of light on the ceiling that listened before I spoke, lay quietly above me, unmoving, but present like a patient friend, sitting close without leaning in, without asking, without assuming, just being there in the soft glow of morning calm. I lay on my back, hands resting on my stomach, feeling my breath rise and fall in slow measured waves in a patch of sunlight. Never flickered, never dim, just stayed
like it understood how fragile the first minutes of waking could be. Dust drifted through the beam, turning the light into a slow golden snowfall, suspended in warm air, each speck a tiny world, gliding through silence without hurry. I felt something inside my chest respond, a small loosening, a soft sigh that didn't hurt this time. The room didn't push me, didn't pull me, didn't expect a single thing from the man lying there with a heart still learning how to beat, without trembling. And yet I felt held by that one patch of light, as if it had been waiting for me to wake, not to speak, but to breathe. The still patch of light on the ceiling that listened before I spoke, carried a gentleness deep and wide. It held the weight I didn't name in a quiet place inside. And though the past still cast its shadows in the corners that I broke, I found comfort in the sunlight, listening before I spoke. I finally whispered a single breath of words, nothing heavy, nothing profound, just a soft good morning. And the light did not change, did not brighten, did not fade, it simply stayed still as truth, calm as forgiveness, warm as bread. And I realized that healing is sometimes a presence that asks nothing of you except to exist for a few small moments, exactly as you are. I place my hand over my heart, feeling the steady rhythm fall into harmony with the quiet above me. Some listening comes from light, not ears, a presence that understands before you find the words. The still patch of light on the ceiling that listened before I spoke, carried a gentleness deep and wide. It held the weight I didn't name in a quiet place inside. And though the past still cast its shadows in the corners that I broke, I found comfort in the sunlight, listening before I spoke. I closed my eyes, let the warmth gather, and whispered to the ceiling, thank you for waiting. space beside the window, where my breath finally matched the light, held a quiet I hadn't earned, yet it welcomed me without question. The soft morning glow pooled near the window frame, a thin wash of warm gold resting against the cool air of the waking room. I step forward, bare feet brushing across the wooden floor, and watch the light move ever so slightly with the shift of the rising sun, a slow dance of brightness and shadow. My breath, still unsteady, reach toward it in small uncertain pulses, trying to find a rhythm it could trust. I placed a hand on the frame, feeling the wood cool beneath my palm, and leaned in just enough to let the light touch my cheek. It did so gently, without demand, without urgency, like someone brushing a stray thought from my face with care. And in that moment my breath fell into a soft cadence, not forced, not corrected, just aligned with the glow spreading slowly through the morning air. Inhale, light rises, exhale, light softens, a quiet harmony forming between my body and the day. The space beside the window, where my breath finally matched the light, carried peace I hadn't known. It wrapped my chest in warming air and softened all I braved alone. And though the past still stirred in shadows, with echoes faint and slight, I felt whole within the stillness, where my breath matched the light. I shifted my weight, letting my shoulders fall away from tension that had lived there. For too long the light expanded, touching my jaw, then my neck, then the hollow just beneath my throat, where worry used to live. And my breath followed it, every rise, every fall, every gentle drift, a conversation between morning and the quietest parts of myself. For the first time in years I felt the line, not with an expectation, not with a plan, not with a burden, but with a moment of pure, uncomplicated being. Some mornings teach us to breathe by showing us how the light does it. The space beside the window, where my breath finally matched the light, carried peace I hadn't known. It wrapped my chest in warming air and softened all I braved alone. And though the past still stirred in shadows, with echoes faint and slight, I felt whole within the stillness, where my breath matched the light. I let my eyes close in the soft radiance and whispered, stay with me. A few breaths more. The soft glow on the edge of the door frame that held my name without sound stood there quietly, like it had been waiting long before I touched the hallway, long before my breath settled into its morning rhythm, long before my thoughts caught up with my body. The light wasn't bright, not sharp, not demanding, just a gentle outline, tracing the wood in a soft halo of pale gold. I paused, half inside the room, half outside, feeling the glow. Brushed the side of my shoulder like a greeting made without words. I stepped closer, watching dust drift through the narrow beam. Each tiny particle floating slowly, as if time itself had chosen this doorway to move more gently. My fingers grazed the frame, feeling warmth gather on the tips, then the knuckles, then the full length of my palm. And it felt almost like being called by a name I hadn't heard in years, now my given name. But the quiet one, the one only safety ever used, the name I forgot when life grew loud and fear made a home in my ribs. The glow held me without speaking, without pushing, just recognizing the man standing in its soft reach. The soft glow on the edge of the door frame that held my name without sound carried comfort deep and low. It brushed the worn out parts of me in morning's tender glow. Though my past still whispered harshly in memories tightly wound, I felt seen within the silence, where the light held my name without sound. I leaned my forehead against the frame, letting the warmth travel into the quiet center of my mind. Slowly, delicately, like a truth unfolding on its own. And for a moment I felt understood, not for what I'd carried, nor for what I'd lost, but simply for existing here, now, breathing, just slightly, enough to wrap around the edge of my arm, like an embrace made of light. It didn't promise anything, didn't fix anything, but it stayed long enough to teach me that recognition doesn't always require a voice. Some belong in our eyes, in the quiet glow of a doorway, where light remembers who you are before you do. The soft glow on the edge of the door frame that held my name without sound carried comfort deep and low. It brushed the worn out parts of me in morning's tender glow. And though my past still whispered harshly and memories tightly wound, I felt seen within the silence, where the light held my name without sound. I let my hand rest along the warm wood and whispered softly, I hear you, even without a word. Quiet shift of shadows on the floor that finally moved with me happened so slowly, I almost missed it. A soft glide of gray stretching across the wooden boards in perfect time, with the angle of my rising breath. For years, my movements felt wrong, too sharp, too rushed, too heavy, like I didn't belong in the spaces I walked through. But this morning, the shadows didn't resist, didn't recoil, didn't scatter. They followed like companions who trusted the pace of my step. I walked from the window toward the center of the room, light shifting behind me, casting a long silhouette that wavered, then steadied, then flowed with a grace I didn't know I still possess. The floor held every footfall with softness, absorbing the weight that once made me flinch. And the shadows moved in rhythm, tracing my hands, my shoulders, my quiet posture without judgment, without fear. It felt like walking with a gentler version of myself, one who knew exactly where I was going, even if I didn't. The quiet shift of shadows on the floor that finally moved with me carried healing in its pace. It mirrored every careful step with slow and tender grace. And though the past still pressed reminders of the weight I used to be, I felt whole within the shadows, now choosing to move with me. Center of the room, watching my shadow settle around my feet, not scattered, not broken, just resting where I stood. For the first time I didn't see a shape stretched thin by fear, or a silhouette haunted by nights too heavy to name. I saw a man in soft morning light, living, breathing, existing with his own presence instead of against it. The shadow shifted again, not away, but closer, as if acknowledging the truth I had been slow to claim. Some acceptance arrives in silence, when the shadows stop running and begin to walk beside you. The quiet shift of shadows on the floor that finally moved with me carried healing in its pace. It mirrored every careful step with slow and tender grace. And though the past still pressed reminders of the weight I used to be, I fell whole within the shadows, now choosing to move with me. I lowered my gaze, let the stillness fill the room, and whispered to my own shadow, thank you for staying. On the floorboards that met my steps like a friend, glowed softly along the far side of the room. A thin border of gold resting right where the shadow faded into light. It wasn't bright, just a warm, a gentle heat
rising from wood that had held years of footsteps, years of wait, years of silence. I walked slowly toward that line of glow, bare feet catching on the smooth grain, feeling the warmth reach toward me before I reached it. When my foot crossed into the soft heat, a calm pulse moved up my leg into my hip, into the quiet pocket beneath my ribs, where old sorrow had once lived like an unwelcome tenant. The warmth traveled further, higher, like a hand laid softly along the curve of my spine. I paused, letting it rise, letting it find every place inside me that still flinched at the thought of beginning. Just a steady warmth reminding me that the world could meet me with kindness. To the warm edge of morning on the floorboards that met my steps like a friend, carried comfort deep and slow. It welcomed me across the threshold into morning's tender glow. And though my heart still held its echoes of nights I couldn't comprehend, I felt held by gentle sunlight meeting me like a friend. Letting each foot sink softly into its warmth, feeling the rhythm of my steps match the rhythm of the light. This simple place, this simple moment felt sacred somehow. A small altar of heat and breath and quiet belief that I was allowed to move forward without fear. The warmth widened as the sun climbed, painting my ankles, my calves, my hands, until I stood half covered in the morning's soft blessing. Some friendships aren't people, they're moments where light meets the tired soul and says, "You're safe now."
like a friend, carried comfort deep and slow. It welcomed me across the threshold into morning's tender glow. And though my heart still held its echoes of nights I couldn't comprehend, I felt held by gentle sunlight meeting me like a friend. I placed my hand over my heart, let the warmth settle and whispered, stay with me. I'm walking slowly.
The quiet place between two sunbeams, where my body finally rested, waited for me like a cradle of light set gently on the center of the floor. Two soft beams falling from the window, framing a narrow space of stillness, a sliver, a pocket, a breath of calm, held perfectly between brightness and brightness. I stepped toward it, bare feet brushing against the cool wood, feeling the morning rise around my ankles. The sunbeams glowed on either side, soft as silk, warm as memory, and the place between them felt like a moment suspended between two truths, two versions of me, two gentle possibilities. I lowered myself slowly, knees bending, hands hovering above the floor. And when I settled into the narrow band of shade held between the light, my entire body exhaled. My shoulders dropped, my spine softened, my jaw unclenched, as if the room had been waiting for this exact posture, this exact moment, this exact man to arrive there. The quiet place between two sunbeams, where my body finally rested, held me in a sacred way. It cradled every tired muscle, every fear I kept at bay. And though the past still shimmered faintly in the corners I'd once tested, I found peace within the stillness where my body finally rested. I lay back, hands resting beside my ribs, looking upward at the ceiling, where faint light rippled gently with the motion of drifting curtains. The two sunbeams frame me, not trapping, not demanding, but honoring the space I chose to occupy. Warmth on my left, warmth on my right, and in the middle, just enough shadow to feel held without burning. And I realize there is a kind of healing that doesn't come from stepping into the light, but from lying in the quiet mercy between it. Some peace is found, not in what's bright, but in the narrow band where the soul rests gently between two sunlit truths. The quiet place between two sunbeams where my body finally rested held me in a sacred way. It cradled every tired muscle, every fear I kept at bay. And though the past still shimmered faintly in the corners I'd once tested, I found peace within the stillness where my body finally rested. I closed my eyes, felt the warmth on both sides, and whispered, "Here I can breathe." The gentle weight of morning on my shoulders that finally let me stand still came slowly, almost shyly, a faint warmth gathering near my neck and drifting downward across the tight muscles I used to hide from my own breath. It didn't press, didn't burden, didn't ask me to straighten up or brace or push forward. It simply rested like a soft hand placed there by someone who understood how long I've been holding my own body up against itself. I stood near the window, feeling the light move across the room, a warm hush settling into the edges of my frame. And when the warmth reached my collarbones, my chest loosened, as if the body had been waiting years for someone to tell it it's okay to stop bracing. My breath deepened just slightly, enough for the air to glide into the hollow spaces behind my ribs. The morning didn't demand progress, didn't demand movement, only presence, only standing, only being, without running from myself. The gentle weight of morning on my shoulders that finally let me stand still carried peace both soft and wise. It lifted burdens quietly without needing my replies. And though my past still whispered warnings with echoes sharp and chill, I found ground within the sunlight, letting me stand still. I
my eyes, letting the warmth deepen. A slow tide rising through the shallow waters of my healing. My shoulders once pulled tight like thread wound too many times, finally release, falling into a posture that felt like truth instead of survival. And in that stillness, I felt something I hadn't touched in years, belonging not to a place or a person, but to my own quiet breath. The room seemed to widen around me, not physically, but gently, as if making space for a man learning to occupy his own life without shrinking. Some freedom is the moment you stop running and the light stays with you. The gentle weight of morning on my shoulders that finally let me stand still, carry peace both soft and wise. It lifted burdens quietly without needing my replies. And though my past still whispered warnings with echoes sharp and chill, I found ground within the sunlight, letting me stand still. A slow breath and whispered, thank you for holding me without asking me to move. Quiet rise of warmth along my spine made breathing feel like a homecoming. Started faint, barely there, a whisper of heat traveling upward from the base of my back. I sat at the edge of the bed, feet grounded, hands resting on my thighs. Breathe slow, eyes half closed, letting the room hold a soft hush around me. The warmth moved gently like fingertips, tracing a path along vertebrae that once braced against every sunrise. When it reached the middle of my back, I inhaled and the breath didn't shake, didn't tremble, didn't break like it used to. It flowed smooth, steady, soft like a river, finally allowed to return to its source. space between breath and heartbeat, where truth often hides when life grows heavy. And for the first time in far too long, my breath didn't feel borrowed, it felt like mine entirely. Quiet rise of warmth along my spine that made breathing feel like a homecoming. Held a tenderness so deep it gathered all the scattered parts I'd lost along my keep. And though the past still murmured softly of wounds I tried numbing, I felt whole within the warmth where my breath found homecoming. My shoulders softened, falling into their rightful place. Not tense, not raised, not guarding against invisible storms. The warmth reached the base of my skull, and I exhaled a long, slow breath that felt like setting down everything I never had words to carry. It was subtle, barely a glow, barely a shift, but it held the softness of forgiveness drifting inward from the spine to the heart. And I realized coming home isn't always a place. Sometimes it's a breath that returns without fear. Some healing is a warmth climbing the spine until the heart remembers its own doorway home. The quiet rise of warmth along my spine that made breathing feel like a homecoming. Held a tenderness so deep it gathered all the scattered parts I'd lost along my keep. And though the past still murmured softly of wounds I tried numbing, I felt whole within the warmth where my breath found homecoming. I placed a palm over my heart, felt the warmth settle and whispered, I'm here. I made it back. The first warm breath that rose from my chest without asking permission came quietly, slipping upward from somewhere deep behind my ribs, like a small truth finally brave enough to surface. I didn't force, it didn't chase, it didn't even expect it. It's simply right on its own terms, a gentle warmth expanding softly through the hollow of my chest. For years my breath had been a negotiation, a battle, a bargain between what I carried and what I tried to forget. But this breath was different, soft, steady, unafraid. As it rose, my shoulders eased just slightly, enough for the body to say, I'm not fighting this one. The warmth reached my throat, then lifted into a slow, full exhale that felt like letting go of a weight I didn't know I still held. The room brightened, just a little shifting, with the rhythm of my breath, as if the morning had been waiting for this exact release. And for once, breathing didn't feel like survival. It felt like returning to myself. The first warm breath that rose from my chest without asking permission carried healing deep inside. It traveled upward through the quiet with a warmth I couldn't hide. And though the past still moved like shadows in the corners of my vision, I found peace within the breathing, rising without permission. Place my hand over the warm feeling, it radiate through my palm into the fine bones of my fingers. It wasn't dramatic, not a sudden revelation, just a soft, steady, honest breath alive in my chest. I watched the light shift across the floor, watched us spiral like tiny galaxies in morning air. And something inside me aligned with the quiet of the room. Another breath rose warm, smooth, unhurried, and then another and another, until my chest remembered how to move without trembling. Some freedom begins with a single breath that rises gently on its own, without fear, without permission, without pain. The first warm breath that rose from my chest without asking permission carried healing deep inside. It traveled upward through the quiet with a warmth I couldn't hide. And though the past still moved like shadows in the corners of my vision, I found peace within the breathing, rising without permission. I let the warmth fill one more breath and whispered, I'm ready to breathe again. the soft pull of light on my hand that made reaching out feel possible. Arrive gently, a small tug, barely a whisper, across the back of my fingers as the morning sun crept higher along the window frame. I held my hand still, palms open, facing downward, thinking nothing, expecting nothing, just letting the quiet do what it needed to do. The light slid closer, brushing the edge of my knuckles with a warmth that felt like invitation, not demand. I turned my hands upward slowly, as if afraid the light might pull away, but it stayed, pouring softly into the lines etched across my palms, filling them with heat, with memory, with possibility. For so long, reaching out had felt dangerous, risky, heavy, a gesture I learned to guard tightly behind quiet walls. But this warmth didn't ask, didn't insist, it simply stayed until my fingers uncurled almost involuntarily toward the glow. And in that tiny movement I felt a shift, a loosening, a quiet hope unfolding. The soft pull of light on my hands that made reaching out feel possible, carried courage warm and bright. It met the trembling in my fingers with a calm and patient light. And though the past still held its warnings and memories uncrossable, I felt hope within the sunlight, making reaching possible. I lifted my hand just a few inches, letting the light dress it in warm gold, feeling the pulse in my wrist, steady, sure, alive. And for the first time, reaching forward didn't feel like falling. It felt like moving towards something gentle, towards something true, towards something that might even reach back. The room held its breath, as if witnessing a small miracle, not loud, not dramatic, just a quiet human moment of courage rising softly through the hands. Some beginnings are nothing more than a hand learning to open toward the light without fear. The soft pull of light on my hand that made reaching out feel possible, carried courage warm and bright. It met the trembling in my fingers with a calm and patient light. And though the past still held its warnings and memories uncrossable, I felt hope within the sunlight, making reaching possible. my hand hovered in the morning glow and whispered, I think I can try. A small circle of warmth around my feet that let me stay instead of run. Formed quietly on the old wooden floor, barely a glow, barely a rising heat, but enough to make my heel settle deeper into the moment. I'd spent years learning to leave before the air shifted, before a memory surfaced, before a feeling got too close. But this morning, the warmth came first, painting a soft halo around my ankles, as if the room was telling me, you don't have to go anywhere. I stood still, hands loose, shoulders lower, letting the warmth gather upward in tiny pulses through the thin bones of my feet. It wasn't much, just a subtle heat rising through the floorboards, steady, grounded, present, enough to keep me here, enough to let my breath settle. Instead of scatter, my toes unclenched, my weight shifted from defense to belonging, and the floor held me with a quiet kindness I didn't know I needed. The small circle around my feet that let me stay instead of run carried peace beneath my stance. It held a trembling in my heels in a quiet, gentle trance. And though the past still whispered softly, telling me I should be gone, I found comfort in the stillness where my feet could stay, not run. I exhaled slowly, letting my breath fall into the soft ring of heat below. Somewhere in my chest, a tiny knot untied itself, one thread at a time, releasing all the half-held escapes I kept rehearsing out of habit. The warmth widened just slightly, enough to brush the tops of my feet, enough to whisper, you're allowed to remain. And for the first time in a long time, staying didn't feel like danger or surrender. It felt like choosing my own presence. Some healing begins when the body feels safe enough to stay exactly where it stands. The small circle of warmth around my feet that let me stay instead of run carried peace beneath my stance. It held a trembling in my heels in a quiet, gentle trance. And though the past still whispered softly, telling me I should be gone, I found comfort in the stillness my feet could stay, not run. I lowered my gaze, let the warmth deepen, and whispered softly, I'm here, and I'm not leaving. Place on the wall where light gathered just enough to let my heart unclench was small. Barely a palm's width, a faint shimmer where the morning sun kissed the faded paint with a tenderness I hadn't felt in years. I stood before it, hands slipping into my pockets, breath uneven, chest still tight. From nights where sleep didn't quite carry me, where silence felt heavier than noise. But the light held its place, not moving, not flickering, just resting in a soft pool of gold. I stepped closer, letting the quiet calm my pulse, bit by bit, feeling warmth radiate gently off the wall. It wasn't enough to blind or overwhelm, but just enough to say loosen just a little. My chest rose, then hesitated, caught on a thread of old tension, pulled tight across years of guarding and bracing. But the light didn't rush me, didn't insist, didn't probe, it simply existed with a patience my heart had never been granted. Slowly, softly, the tightness eased as if the light was unraveling, knots I tied without knowing. The place on the wall where light gathered just enough to let my heart unclench, held a mercy warm and thin, it let the weight behind my ribs fall gently from within. And though my past still kept its echoes, twisting like a hidden wrench, I found peace within the sunlight that let my heart unclench. I pressed my palm against the warm spot on the wall, feeling heat move into my hand, then into my wrist, then into the quiet beneath my sternum. And something shifted inside me, not loudly, not dramatically, but like a single petal falling from a flower ready to bloom again. I breathed in deep, unbroken, smooth, and for the first time in countless mornings, the breath didn't get trapped behind the heaviness I carried. just stays long enough for the heart to loosen. The place on the wall where light gathered just enough to let my heart unclench, held a mercy warm and thin, and let the weight behind my ribs fall gently from within. And though my past still kept its echoes, twisting like a hidden wrench, I found peace within the sunlight that let my heart unclench. Let my hand fall to my side, breath warm, chest open, and whispered I can soften now.
Gentle pause in the air beside me that let my shoulders finally settle. Came without warning, a soft stillness forming near my left side. A hush so quiet, it felt almost like someone standing there, breathing slowly with me. I didn't turn, didn't search, didn't question. I just let the pause surround me like warm silence, resting a hand on the tense joints I kept raised for far too long. My shoulders had been armor for years, held high, held tight, held ready for storms that never came, but lived in memory. The stillness grew, expanding into the space around my collarbones, around my neck, around the quiet curve of my chest. I exhaled a breath so long, it surprised me, a soft collapse of tension, draining downward like sand, falling through an hourglass. My shoulders dropped almost involuntarily, lower, 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 until they rested at a height I didn't remember ever being safe. The pause in the air stayed with me, a companion made of warm and quiet permission, letting me know I didn't need to brace anymore. The gentle pause in the air beside me that let my shoulders finally settle, carried peace too soft to name. It wrapped the trembling in my stance, like a hand without a claim. And though my past still whispered warnings in echoes worn and brittle, I found calm within a stillness where my shoulders could settle. Could settle. placed a hand on my chest, feeling the space inside me shift, growing wider, growing warmer, as if my ribs had finally learned how to welcome my own breath. The air beside me remained quiet, unmoving, steady, as though it had promised to stay, just long enough for me to arrive fully into the comfort of my own presence. I sighed, a soft sigh, one that didn't hurt, one that didn't shake, one that didn't break, and the pause held it gently. Some healing is the moment the body releases without being told it must. The gentle pause in the air beside me that let my shoulders finally settle, carried peace too soft to name. It wrapped the trembling in my stance, like a hand without a claim. And though my past still whispered warnings in echoes worn and brittle, I found calm within the stillness where my shoulders could settle. Could settle. I lifted my chin, felt the quiet hold its place, and whispered, I can rest now.
The soft line of light across the bed that told me I didn't have to hurry anymore, shone thin and steady, a quiet stripe of gold, cutting gently across the rumpled sheets. I stood at the edge, still half dreaming, still warm from sleep, watching the light stretch slowly as the sun climbs somewhere beyond the silent window. No urgency, no push, no pull, just a calm reminder that the world could move without dragging me with it. The line of light shifted just enough to glow across the blanket's crease, a soft illumination of every small wrinkle, every quiet fold, every bit of fabric holding the shape of rest. It felt like a message, a gentle whisper, saying you've carried enough, you don't have to run this morning. My breath slowed, my chest expanded in a way that felt almost unfamiliar. Not tense, not sharp, but easy and whole. I placed a hand on the bed where the light touched, feeling warmth move under my palm. And for the first time in years, I let myself stay in that moment without racing toward the next one. The soft line of light across the bed that told me I didn't have to hurry anymore, carried comfort bright and clear. It loosened all the frantic echoes of the weight I used to fear. And though the past still held on the edges of my core. I found peace within the sunlight, telling me not to hurry anymore. I sat down slowly, letting the mattress dip beneath me, letting the line of light fall across my lap, my hands, my breath. The quiet glow moved as gently as a fingertip, tracing reassurance along the weave of my own story. I didn't need to accomplish anything, didn't need to prepare, to plan, to brace. I only needed to breathe, to feel, to sit inside the calm that morning, to live it without asking for anything in return. Some mornings teach you that stillness is not a luxury, but a necessity given freely by the light. The soft line of light across the bed that told me I didn't have to hurry anymore. Carry comfort bright and clear, it loosened all the frantic echoes of the weight I used to fear. And though the past still held its warnings on the edges of my core, I found peace within the sunlight, telling me not to hurry anymore. I brush my hand through the gentle glow and whispered softly, I'll move when I'm ready. The gentle stillness beneath my breath that stayed long after the light faded came softly as the room dimmed and the last traces of gold slid down the walls into evening's calm blue. I sat near the window, watching the final glow disappear behind the rooftops, leaving only a soft reflection of everything the day had opened inside me. My breath rose slow, unhurried, carrying the warmth of every small moment that taught me how to return to myself.
shadows lengthened across the floor, but the stillness inside me did not fade, did not tremble, did not run. It settled deep in my chest like a gentle anchor holding me with a care I had once believed was too fragile to trust. Even in the dimming light, my breath remained warm, a reminder of morning's kindness, of sunlight's truth, of every quiet moment where my body had been allowed to soften. The gentle stillness beneath my breath that stayed long after the light faded carried peace I thought I'd lost. It held the echoes of my healing, flowing slowly without cost. And though the past still whispered softly of the storms I'd once evaded, I found calm within the breeze that remained when light faded. Night pressed softly against the window, a cool presence touching my arm, and yet the warmth inside didn't retreat, didn't collapse, didn't vanish. It lingered like a quiet companion, sitting close without words, without expectation, without the need to be understood. My shoulders stayed relaxed, my jaw stayed loose, and for the first time in a long journey, stillness felt like something I was allowed to keep. Some peace outlives a light, some breaths carry the day into the night softly. The gentle stillness beneath my breath that stayed long after the light faded carried peace I thought I'd lost. It held the echoes of my healing, flowing slowly without cost. And though the past still whispered softly of the storms I'd once evaded, I found calm within the breathing that remained when light faded. I closed my eyes, placed a hand over my heart, and whispered, "Stay with me." Into the dark.